Oh, hallo John.
Was geht ab, Viv? Du hast gesagt, ich wäre in der Band.
Du bist in der Band.
Wirklich?
Nein, bist du nicht. Wer bist du denn?
Das ist der John, von dem ich dir erzählt habe. Die Wangenknochen.
Wir haben schon den John mit den Wangenknochen.
Nein, du hast den John mit den Zähnen. Ist mein Kumpel.
Du hast den falschen John.
Ich will in diese Band.
Aber wir brauchen dich nicht.
Hello, Mr. Pierce.
Hey Yannick, lovely to see you.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm really well. I flew in from New York last night. We were doing a Vanity Fair screening and some of this there, and and we've got a big premiere tonight in Leicester Square. Many of the Pistols are coming. Chrissy Hines walking Steve down the red carpet. So it's an exciting time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I would like to know if you had to describe the story of the show in one sentence, how would you do it?
It's the story of the forgotten generation who felt that they had no future, rising up and creating that future for themselves.
Okay. What fascinates you most about the history of the Sex Pistols?
There is so many fascinating aspects to that era. You know, the 70s was such a moribund, boring, economically tough time in the UK, and the promise of the swinging 60s hadn't come true, hadn't proven itself. And so, economic hardship, unemployment, and these kids who felt that they had no future. They felt that they were forgotten by society, and they channeled all of that energy and anger into a creative movement. Not only music, but also art and culture, the visual arts, and they changed the world. You know, they forced the world to listen to them. But through that pressure cooker of a time, there was this immensely vibrant collection of characters, because I think extreme times create extreme characters and extreme movements in history. So it's the music, it's the fashion, it's the art, and it's the way that they changed society, stood up to the powers that were, and really created the future of music and popular culture as we know it. You know, you can really see very clearly there's a time before the Sex Pistols, BS, before the Sex Pistols, and a time after the Sex Pistols, AS. And that's very, very exciting to look at the birth of that and how that came about. But of course, at the center of it, there's a deeply emotional story. And we use, Lonely Boy as a jumping off point for that, Steve's story. He really had the toughest of upbringings, the poorest of the poor, no father, never knew his father, abusive stepfather, a mother who couldn't really love him, didn't have the facility to love him. And, he doesn't blame her for that, but she had a tough time of it too. But, he hid all that, beneath a charming exterior, this sort of, gift of the gab, but channeled all of that damage into the music. And along with his other, band members, the creation of that art form was in this sort of crucible of pain and anger in many ways. And so uncovering that and looking at that creative journey and that emotional journey and the way those characters weave in and out together also fascinates me as a dramatist.
All right. You already spoke about Steve Jones.
Yeah.
The show is based on his story. Mm-hmm. What was the biggest challenge in writing the screenplay?
I think the biggest challenge when you're writing something that's based on real people is to honor the truth of their story and their lives, while at the same time not trying to make a documentary. You don't, to make drama, you have to condense the facts. And sometimes you have to weave around the facts to find the elemental, essential truth, because truth and facts aren't always the same thing. We can interpret facts in many, many different ways depending on who we are. But so it was weaving all those stories together because there are so many interesting characters. Vivienne Westwood, Malcolm McLaren, Chrissie Hynde, Jordan, just to name a few. And so it's taking all these stories, giving them enough screen time to honour their stories, but also making exciting, funny, entertaining, moving drama, and then trying to say something that's out of all this weave, try to create a tapestry that speaks to the world and an audience. And it's fun. The process. You start big. There's a book. There's the punk movement. There's this political time, and it's like this big block of marble. And you kind of intuitively try and find where you think the story will go, and you hack big chunks off the marble, and the story starts to emerge, and it might not be what you think it was going to be at first, and and eventually until right at the end, while we're shooting, on set, you just got a little bit of sandpaper. Oh no, take that word out. Or put a comma there. Actor says, oh, what about if I do this? And you go, well, no, but what about if you did that? Or often the actor's like, yes, do that, because the actor, no one can be a better advocate for their story than an actor.
All right, last question. What do you appreciate about working with Danny Boyle as a director?
Well, Danny's incredible, of course. I mean, we've all, seen his films, so we know his talent. One of the things about this project was Danny's so incredibly passionate about music, and he's exactly the same age as Steve Jones. So it was, and Danny also grew up in a working class environment where he kind of wasn't offered much in terms of future and really had to break the mold of what was expected of him. So that is very emblematic and thematical to this story. So it's his passion for the story and the time. Also, the great care that he takes in terms of creating an environment where people feel safe and supported to work, which is very important. He challenges you, and he challenges the actors, and he challenges everyone on the crew, but he creates an environment where you feel like you can fail, and that's essential for any creative endeavor. If you feel like, I can't really go there because I might fail and I'll get into, quote unquote, trouble, the real creativity doesn't come. The real creativity comes when you feel that you can leap into the abyss and really discover something that you didn't know was there. So yeah, and he just has an incredibly creative visual style also, and he shot the way he shot the piece was with his chaotic style, with always a moving camera, and he comes from a theatre background as I do, and we know just the fundamental importance of rehearsal and of actors who fully inhabit their characters and know what they're doing. We had a lot of rehearsal, and we had this thing called band camp, where everyone who was in the Sex Pistols learned how to play and be their band character, a Sex Pistol. They became the Sex Pistols. So every piece of music that you see played on the screen, whether it's members of the Sex Pistols, whether it's Chrissie Hynde, whoever it is, they're all playing and singing. Yeah, and there's no sort of overdubbing it in post-production or miming or anything like that. It was visceral and it was real and it was immediate. And, some directors wouldn't have been smart enough to know that is quintessential to an authenticity on screen that's almost intangible, but you can just feel it. You get drawn into the screen because you see these people playing, like when they're playing at the clubs, rehearsals, they really are playing, and you see them improve. And we saw them improve, obviously before the shoot, but also through the shoot as well.
All right, thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Yeah, good
Bye.
luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So, Mr. Boyle, it's nice speaking to you.
And you?
I enjoyed the show very much.
Oh, good.
I got to know your craft. Of course, I knew a lot of films, a lot of movies, but now I got to really get in touch with your craft, and I enjoyed it. What can fans look forward to in Pistol?
Well, music, really. I realise, now when we're promoting it and, doing interviews like this, I realise it's just been an extraordinary... If you know any of the work I've done previously, music's always very important in the films. I've always been very proud of the music, and it's a very big part of it. It's a very big part of the identity of the films. But I've never done anything quite so... Well, the core of it is music. And I remember this because I'm the same age as Steve Jones. When the Pistols started, we weren't really interested in them as people, as individuals, as celebrities. They weren't. We were interested in the music. That album, which features no photographs of them, just the album, it was just about the music and the impact of that music. So to be able to make a television series where you have to turn people into characters and celebrities and all those kind of things, because that's how the way the world stories work. And in fact, it's the way the world developed the Pistols, because Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten became big celebrities, if you like. But to be able to celebrate it all through music principally, to make the core value of it music, is something that I never thought I'd ever quite achieve as purely as this. And it's because it's the liquid architecture of our lives, of my life anyway, music. And this is the starting point. For me, it wasn't the Beatles. I was 10 when the Beatles started. And my parents used to listen to it. And I love the Beatles music, who wouldn't? But this was the start of music where it meant something. It wasn't just a soundtrack, it actually meant something deeply to your lives. So I've carried some of the principles of it throughout my working career, the energy, the anger, the kind of lack of deference, the hope of passing it to people and just saying it's yours, this is ours. It's extraordinary music like that. It's not about qualifications. You don't have to have been to an academy to be doing it. You just do it because it allows you to express yourself. And it's much more democratic than filmmaking, for instance, because filmmaking costs money, and it's all very well saying go out and make it on your Super 8. But anybody who wants to say anything starts up a band. You and your mates just play music together. And that's what this story is. It's just 4 working class kids from London who formed this force field that changed British society, which looked impervious to change, looked impossible. And they did change it. And I remember it. I remember what life like was before and how it changed afterwards. And it didn't always change for the better. There were lots of things that were bad and shit happened and Margaret Thatcher happened and all that kind of stuff. But they changed it. They broke the surface of the spectacle and shattered it and said, make your own way.
Wow, very interesting. What would you say was the biggest challenge while you were creating the film? Trying
to make it and value chaos. Because Vivian Westwood's philosophy, and which was inherited by Malcolm McLaren, played by Thomas Brodie Sangster, he stole a lot of it from her. But she believed in that only real creativity comes out of chaos. When you burn everything down, that will give you new growth. Otherwise, you're just photocopying things, really. So filmmaking is a nightmare because it hates chaos. Because it has to have order and structure. It has to have a schedule for the day. We film this here, we film that there. We've got to finish there because we can't afford the overtime, blah, 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 blah. And the storytelling in the screenwriting that's done before is also about order. It's making things make sense. But you try to shoot it in a way that feels chaotic. Because otherwise it's going to look too rigid and it isn't going to be free like the Sex Pistols were, to make their own decisions, to do what they wanted. And so it was trying to value chaos and work to the principles of chaos throughout and hope that by the time you got to the end that it would make sense or enough sense that it would be bearable, because it would go unbearable. Complete chaos is unbearable, of course, as we know. It has to make some kind of sense at some point. But you can't let that suffocate the spirit or the energy or the origins of the Sex Pistols. So chaos, yeah. Creating chaos.
What is the most important achievement of the Pistols besides the musical one?
Just how they showed people that you could, because there were so many groups followed them, they showed people that you could break your inheritance, really. So much of punk was proper working class kids. They were working class bands. They weren't really art school bands, or they weren't middle class bands. It was a working class movement, really. Which is why some of the violence of it is, people were so shocked by. But there was, and I know this from personal experience. You were young and then you were old. And I used to look at my mates and you could see them that they were already turning into their fathers. Whether they wanted to or not, whether they thought they wanted to or not, they did. You just turned into your mother or your father. You just followed in their footsteps. And it was a small bridge between being young and being old. You started to look like, and it's interesting, of course, punk was such about fashion. You started to wear your father's clothes. And what punk did is it blew that bridge up. And that chasm that was created between that is somewhere that we all live now. And whole economies around the world are based on it, which is that experience now. You live in this space in between for the maximum amount of time in your life. From being young to being old, we've maximised that, and the Pistols started that. They blew that bridge up and said, it's yours. Your life is not timed. It's timelessness. You can do what you want with it, and you can waste it if you want. You don't even have to do anything admirable and positive with it. You can completely be vacant, be futile. That's up to you, but it's yours. And they were supremely unqualified to say it because they didn't have any qualifications. They couldn't play any instruments, but actually they could. They learned. They were really good in the end, So that's the great achievement of them, is that shift in the spectacle that said that you have a value, even though everybody's telling you don't, and everybody was telling them they should be in prison. They were saying, no, here you go. And so I love the scene. They do go to a prison in episode 3. They go to Chelmsford Prison and they play Anarchy in the UK there. And I love that sequence because everybody in this country thought they should be in prison. That's where they belonged. So they went there and they played a concert there. I love that. Anyway.
Thank you so much for your time and much success, Mr. Boyle.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers now.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good,
hello.
thanks.
Well, thank you.
Welcome. I would like to start with you, Miss Riley. You play the designer Vivienne Westwood. What makes her stand out as a person?
As a person, well, I mean, I think we all know she is Vivienne Westwood. She is an icon. She has perhaps more name recognition now than the Sex Pistols do. In terms of playing the character Vivienne as scripted, I think what really stood out for me was her work ethic and how she was able to handle different streams of her life, her children, her relationship with her partner, and building a business. So that was quite fun to do.
All right. What impact did she have on the band and punk rock itself?
Vivienne Westwood was responsible for creating the aesthetic of punk, which I did not know before we started the project. Vivienne actually designed the anarchy symbol, the A inside the circle that is graffitied on walls. That was she came up with that. I think the sort of the ideology she had, which was very ahead of its time, to kind of not waste things, reuse, recycle. The way she cut cloth was completely innovative. Instead of classic tailoring where you cut out shapes from fabric, she made sure to use the whole piece of cloth that she had, which is why with punk you get lots of streams and added bits on and tied bits and skirts on top of trousers. So she was really massively creative.
Yeah, her style of designing is very interesting. Can you identify yourself with her style or with her fashion of that time?
Well, I'm wearing Vivian now, which I really enjoy, and I actually got to borrow her jacket from the day, her original leather jacket, which was really nice, and I really enjoyed wearing that and having a little bit of Vivian with me. Yeah.
Okay, Miss Chandler, you play Chrissy Hind. Hi. She's the lead singer of the Pretenders. What did you like the most about your role?
I think after reading the script, I really connected to this character's bravery to jump across the sea and go to London all on her own. And I feel like there's so much chaos going on in the show, and I was able to play a character who sort of observes the chaos going on, and then is able to have more intimate connections with specific characters. You get to see a different side of them when it's just them and Chrissy in the room. We had some really fun scenes like that as well, and so I really enjoyed that, because for me, I've never been to London. I was also jumping across the pond and soaking up as much as I could of the process. So I felt a great connection to that, being able to be the observer in a way.
Mm-hmm. She repeatedly struggled with being underestimated as an artist. How do you think this came about?
Well, I think creating any art form is going to be a struggle, and then you take the time period and the circumstances. But Chrissy, she had her own back, and she was playing the long game. She needed to be the front runner of her band. She had so much creativity, and her musical ability is just absolutely incredible. And so, it took a long time, but it's kind of, it shows you if you don't give up and you truly do, persevere. Her work ethic was actually incredible too. She always had a job. Wherever she would be, she'd find some place to go work. She'd keep working. Sit up late at night and play the electric guitar without plugging it in while everyone else was out partying. She loved her music. That drive was there. And she sold more records than anyone else in the show. So she did okay.
I think so too. She was working in the shop run by Vivienne Westwood. What role did the boutique play for the band and the punk rock movement in general?
Well, I think, Vivienne Westwood, especially in our script, she had a huge role in bringing the band together and dressing them, all of that. So I think, was that the question? I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, like the whole
Vivienne
role,
did for the band?
Yes, and the whole role of the boutique.
Yeah, I mean, it was a kind of a place to go and experience something completely brand new. It was like, revolution in clothes. And the walls were covered in words. There were pictures and just, all of the clothes were just completely different from anything else that you could find. So, and people would go into the store and just to look at Jordan, who's played by Maisie Williams. She was kind of that embodiment of Vivienne's work, and so it was almost like an art piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Miss Appleton, you play Sid Vicious' girlfriend, Nancy. What kind of person is she?
Well, it's different from Nancy as a real person to the Nancy that we have in the script, because obviously we can't claim to know her. We can't. We did want to do an imitation. So I read my source materials. I read a book that her mother wrote, which was very important to me to get the essence and some truth of Nancy, and then weave that into the Nancy that we had in the script. But I think we see so many different sides of her. We see her being vulnerable. We see her fragility. We see her just wanting to be safe and looked after, which is one of the scenes we have, which, everyone's kind of got that in them, so why should she be any different? And then we also see her drive for wanting to be with Sid and having this, have this incredible magnetism as characters. And we also see her wanting to be involved in the Sex Pistols and definitely throwing her opinions out there. And seeing how they come back. So, yeah, fascinating character.
Exactly. How would you classify Sid Vicious, and how would you describe the dynamic between the two?
What I felt is with the character, they very much complete each other and destroy each other at the same time. And I think they feel like the world is against them, the world doesn't understand them, and there's something that they recognize in each other. And I think they're just these two magnets that are drawn together, and they just create their own world that they inhabit.
Okay. The next question is a little bit philosophical. How do you think the punk philosophy can be continued today?
I think so many things can be punk. I think punk is about being unapologetic, about your style, about maybe your opinions, or just the way that you're living your life. I think so many things can be punk. Maybe it's just going against the grain, going against the status quo, not conforming. I feel like it's a much broader term these days.
It's like being unapologetically yourself, and not letting anything stand in the way of that, which I think is really important.
Okay, very interesting. What was your favorite, you can all answer now, what was your favorite moment while you were doing the project?
I really loved being on the barge. So we took a boat down the River Thames, past the Houses of Parliament, and recreated the Sex Pistols Jubilee gig. So that was really wonderful. We had cameras on drones flying around, circling, and we were to be right there on the river next to the Houses of Parliament was really good fun.
I think for me, the rehearsal process, and especially the musical rehearsal process, learning how to play guitar and learning how to sing, and then to sing with Chrissy's essence mixed into it. There was a lot of work, and the teachers that we had were just absolutely incredible. So that was a really cool experience to have.
Yeah, I really loved the rehearsal period because we never get a chance to have that on other jobs. That was really, really special, just to get in a room and get to know each other, get comfortable with each other, and play around with scenes and be creative with Danny before you get on set. And any scene where there was a gig scene and the boys were playing, because there's no post, so you are watching live music.
These rehearsals, were they part of the band camp? Because the guys told me about the band camp and they loved it, and they said they were grown together in this time period and learned how to play the instruments and how to act on stage. So you were also part of this band camp in the beginning?
Yeah. I was, yeah. I mean, I obviously wasn't rehearsing with them, but I got to work on Chrissy's songs that are in the show, and so I also it was fun to work with, learning how to work with an actual band. I wasn't very musical at all before this, and so learning how to find an appreciation and a true love for music was really helpful, and helped me find my character and my way into our story that much better.
All right. What's up next for you?
Oh, I don't know yet.
I have a novel coming out next month.
Yes.
It's called The Quickening.
I will be reading that novel. That's what I'll be doing next.
Okay. Thank you for your time and much success with the show.
Thank you
very
so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.